17 unsearchable topics, 7 levels. This iceberg is full of things you should never search up. We have everything from serial killers' audio memories to literal devices of torment. And the further in we get, the more horrifyingly twisted everything will become. Let's start at the tip of the iceberg. Level 1. Pacu fish teeth. Imagine this. You just caught a fish. You're super excited and you decide to peek into its mouth. And there they are, staring back at you like a dental nightmare made flesh. Squared off teeth with flat grinding surfaces arranged in neat rows exactly like the molars tucked away in the back of your own mouth. This weird-looking thing is the pacu fish, and whenever anglers first encounter it, their immediate reaction is pure shock. These are genuine molars designed for crushing and grinding, with thick enamel concentrated on the cusps exactly where humans have their heaviest tooth material. When you see a pacu's mouth, it's like looking at a fish wearing dentures stolen from a person. For some reason, it's like looking in a mirror. No offense. These teeth evolved specifically to handle the toughest plant material in the Amazon. While their piranha cousins developed razor-sharp triangular teeth for slicing flesh, pacus needed something completely different to crack through the rock-hard shells of palm nuts and Brazil nuts that fall into the water. So their powerful jaws can exert crushing force that would snap through cables. In fact, the pacu has stronger teeth than the piranha, but here's where things get really scary. Despite being primarily vegetarians, these fish do eat meat when the opportunity arises. In their native Amazon, they occasionally consume small fish and invertebrates. When pacus were introduced to Papua New Guinea, waters lacking their usual plant food sources, they shifted their diet dramatically, becoming primarily piscivorous, fish eaters, cannibals. They're opportunistic omnivores with the jaw strength to bite through bone. The legends that surround pacus are absurd but creepy. Local fishermen in Papua New Guinea dubbed them ball cutters after reported incidents where the fish allegedly bit swimmers' genitals, mistaking them for floating nuts, yeah. But those incidents are plausible because they're so possible. A curious fish investigating what appears to be a floating object could easily deliver a devastating bite before realizing its mistake, and by that point, it's bye-bye future children. One toddler in Scotland needed surgery after a pacu bit her finger at an aquarium, with staff warning that pacus will eat anything, even children's wiggling fingers. Oh, and unlike piranhas that replace teeth individually, pacus replace entire rows at once, continuously cycling through new sets of molars throughout their lives. So that's weird, right? They maintain multiple rows of backup teeth embedded in their jaws, ready to erupt when needed. This means they're constantly armed with fresh, sharp crushing surfaces. Their dental replacement system is so efficient that they never experience the dulling that would limit their ability to process hard materials. The pacu has been found in New Jersey lakes, Oklahoma ponds, Michigan rivers, much more suburban areas than just the Amazon. So if you ever see a fish that looks like you, don't go skinny dipping. Island of Dolls, La Isla de las Muñecas. In the 1950s, Don Julian Santana Barrera found a body floating face down in the canals of Xochimilco. It was a young girl tangled in the water lilies. The next day, a doll came drifting down the same waterway. Believing that it was this young girl's doll, he hung it from a tree branch as a gesture of respect for the dead. But that single act would consume the next 50 years of his life. That night, and every night after, Julian said he could hear the girl screaming from beyond the grave, demanding more dolls. Always more dolls. Julian became obsessed. He started scouring garbage dumps, trading his vegetables for any dolls he could find, broken or not, hanging them exactly as he found them. Headless, limbless, eyes gouged out by time and neglect. Over time, the natural elements ruined them even more, turning the innocent faces into cracked masks. their plastic skin peeling away in strips, their hair matted with decades of rain and rot. So many people came to believe that Julian had lost his mind. Some questioned whether the drowned girl ever existed at all, including Julian's own family, suggesting he'd invented the entire story in his isolation on this weird island. But Julian never wavered from his vision, spending every waking moment adding to his grotesque collection, convinced that each new doll would finally appease whatever haunted the waterways around his island home. By 2001, nearly 1,000 mutilated toys dangled from every tree branch, their blank stares covering just about every square inch of the island. Sometime later, Julian's nephew, Anastasio, came to help his uncle plant pumpkins on that April morning. Anastasio, like all of Julian's family, was concerned and freaked out by the endless dolls on the island, but he loved his uncle, so he just pushed through. But while they fished together, the old man began singing passionately, claiming that mermaids in the water were calling for him. When Anastasio returned from a brief absence, he found Julian face down in the canal, dead from what the medical examiner ruled a heart attack. He had died in exactly the same spot where he'd claimed to discover the girl's body 50 years earlier. Today, Las Islas de las Muñecas draws tourists who come to photograph the decay, adding their own dolls to Julian's collection in a strange tribute to both the dead girl who may never have existed and the man whose death mirrored his obsession. The Guinness World Records now lists it as the world's largest collection of haunted dolls, as visitors report the toys still whisper to each other in the darkness, still move their heads when no one's watching, still demand attention from anyone brave enough to step foot on their cursed ground. Whether that's true or not, I sure as hell don't want to find out. Level 2. Suriname Toad Birth. You know that feeling when you watch something that makes your skin crawl and you can't look away even though every instinct tells you to? That's exactly what happens when you witness a Suriname toad giving birth. The process starts with a male's clicking call underwater, the female responding, their bodies intertwining in what scientists call amplexus. But from that moment, everything takes a turn into what only can be described as biological horror. The male grabs onto the female's back with his front limbs holding tight as they begin their marathon dance through murky South American waters. They somersault through the water for up to 12 hours, performing these acrobatic loops from bottom to surface. At the peak of each loop, the female releases just 3 to 10 eggs at a time. The male fertilizes them mid-flip, catches them on his belly, then uses his hind feet like a shovel to roll them onto the female's back. These eggs stick only to her skin, never to his body or to each other. Scientists still can't explain why this selective adhesion happens, but the truly disturbing part begins in the hours after mating. The female's back starts to swell and thicken. The skin becomes spongy and engorged with blood vessels. Within 24 hours, her back transforms into something resembling raw meat as the skin grows up and around each egg. The eggs sink deep into her flesh, becoming completely embedded. Her back develops into a honeycomb structure of pockets, each one housing a developing toadlet. For 3 to 4 months, these toadlets develop inside their mother's back. They undergo complete metamorphosis within her flesh, from egg to tadpole to fully formed toad. The mother carries around what essentially amounts to living bubbles under her skin, each one containing a growing creature. Her back swells and bulges as the toadlets grow larger, creating an increasingly grotesque surface of moving lumps. When the time comes for birth, the sight is something that sticks with you forever. The fully developed toadlets are now about 2 centimeters long and begin punching through the skin of their mother's back. They break through one by one, heads first, then bodies, emerging from those tiny holes scattered across her surface. Up to 100 babies can erupt from their mother's back during this process. It's kind of horrific. After giving birth, the female sheds the entire traumatized layer of skin from her back like a snake molting. The damaged tissue simply falls away, revealing fresh skin underneath that will be ready for the next breeding cycle. She swims away, her back scarred with tiny holes that will eventually heal, ready to repeat this entire grotesque process again. The newborn toadlets, meanwhile, are immediately ready to hunt and survive on their own, straight into the murky waters where they'll eventually continue this deeply unsettling cycle of reproduction. Lucky for us, a much less painful way to be entertained is to hit the subscribe button and watch more of our videos. Let's move on to the next level. Level 3. Dead whale exploding. Whales are the biggest animals on the planet, but they're also ticking time bombs when they're dead. The moment a whale's massive heart stops beating, bacteria swarm through its tissue like microscopic invaders claiming this territory as their own. These microorganisms feast on whale flesh relentlessly, breaking down proteins and fats while producing methane and carbon dioxide as waste products. Those gases accumulate relentlessly inside the carcass, trapped by thick walls of blubber that can measure up to 30 inches deep. In a way, you can picture the internal pressure building like a very unusual balloon stretching beyond its limits. The whale's skin imprisons those expanding gases, the methane, being lighter than air, rises into the upper cavity of the carcass, creating pockets of concentrated, explosive material. Over time, the pressure grows into several tons worth of gas trapped inside what amounts to a biological pressure cooker. One of the most noteworthy cases of this was in Florence, Oregon in November 1970. An 8-ton sperm whale washed ashore, a huge 45-foot carcass that began decomposing immediately, filling the air with a brutal, foul stench that drove away the onlookers. Because they couldn't just pick up and move a giant 8-ton whale, Oregon Highway Division officials decided dynamite would solve their problem. George Thornton, the engineer in charge, admitted he had no idea how much explosive to use because his supervisor had gone hunting, leaving him to improvise. Dynamite seemed like an easy solution and apparently was very easy to get a hold of in 1970s Oregon. On November 12, 1970, they detonated half a ton of dynamite, creating a 100-foot column of blood, sand, and whale parts erupting skyward. Chunks of blubber rained down like a kind of meat hail, crushing a car parked a quarter-mile away. Spectators screamed and ran for cover as 3-foot pieces of whale flesh plummeted from above. Some of them probably thought it was a weirdly fishy apocalypse. The explosion scattered whale remains over 800 feet in every direction. However, the natural explosions are far more disturbing. In Taiwan during 2004, a 56-foot sperm whale being transported through downtown Tianan spontaneously burst. All those decomposing gases we talked about had built up so intensely that the pressure finally exceeded the carcass's structural limits. Blood and intestines sprayed across busy streets, coating cars and pedestrians in rotting whale guts. The smell was so overwhelming that residents wore masks while cleaning entrails from storefronts and sidewalks. These explosions happen because whale anatomy creates perfect conditions for gas accumulation. The blubber layer that kept the whale warm in frigid ocean depths becomes a death trap, preventing gases from escaping naturally. Without release valves, pressure mounts until the carcass ruptures violently, showering everything nearby with decomposed whale matter and ruining your perfectly orchestrated outfit. Level 4. Toy Box Killer Audio Tapes. David Parker Ray operated in a trailer outside Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, conducting what he considered experiments in human suffering.
Different ways.
The whole time, David was documenting his intentions through audio recordings that revealed just how calculating and detached from human empathy he was. The tapes David created were carefully crafted psychological weapons designed to break his victims before the physical violence even began. His voice on these recordings told his victims exactly what would happen to them, how long they would be held, and what their status would be during captivity.
That you will not be given any opportunity to escape. A long, heavy chain is going to be kept locked around your neck. I've told you exactly what I plan to do, and it's going to be painful as hell. That's the way I want it to be.
He compared his victims to animals, stripping away any sense of humanity before the physical violence began. In March 1999, Cynthia Vigil became the very first person to escape. She had endured 3 days of sustained violence in the soundproof trailer, which he had equipped with medical instruments, restraints, and electrical devices. When David left for his job as a New Mexico Parks Department maintenance worker, Cynthia seized her chance. Finding the keys to her restraints within reach, she freed herself and fought off David's accomplice, Cindy Hendy, with an ice pick before fleeing the trailer. Cynthia ran naked except for a metal collar around her neck, eventually reaching a nearby mobile home where residents called police. Her detailed descriptions of the trailer's interior led investigators directly to David's property, where they uncovered what FBI agents described as evidence that literally made my stomach turn. They found a collection of over 100 videotapes and multiple audio recordings, proving he had been refining his techniques for decades. Those videotapes showed unconscious women being violated in the trailer. One tape helped identify Kelly Garrett, who had been so heavily drugged during her captivity that she had no memory of the events until investigators showed her footage of herself. The drugs David used were part of a deliberate strategy to erase memories, ensuring victims couldn't report their experiences or identify him afterward. The audio tapes revealed Ray's complete lack of remorse or recognition that his victims were human beings. He spoke about previous victims matter-of-factly, promising new captives they would suffer the same fate. Ray's death from a heart attack in May 2002 came just as investigators were preparing for a major interrogation session. He had been sentenced to 224 years in prison, but had served only 3 years when he died. His death meant that dozens of suspected victims would never be identified, and families of missing women would never get answers about their loved ones' fates. The FBI continued searching for evidence of Ray's victims long after his death, eventually releasing hundreds of photographs of jewelry and personal items found in his trailer. They hoped someone would recognize a bracelet, necklace, or a piece of clothing and come forward with information about missing family members. But despite extensive searches of Elephant Butt Lake and surrounding areas, no bodies were ever recovered. Level 5. The Breaking Wheel, Catherine Wheel. The breaking wheel was essentially death by committee, designed to extract every ounce of pain while keeping its victim conscious and breathing for as long as humanly possible. This was a deliberate humiliation machine, which saw the condemned person dragged to a scaffold in the town square, tied to the floor with their limbs spread wide, completely vulnerable to whatever came next. The executioner would position a massive wooden wheel, the same type used on carriages, but sometimes fitted with iron spikes or blades, and began the slow process of bone crushing. The device wasn't designed for death, but for agonizing mutilation. Starting with the shin bones, the wheel would be dropped repeatedly onto each limb, working up to the arms. Courts often prescribed the exact number of blows and which bones to target as part of their sentence. Sometimes sharp-edged timbers were placed under the victim's joints to amplify the damage when the wheel came crashing down, just in case it wasn't extreme enough. After the breaking stopped, the victims were still alive, their limbs now useless bags of bone fragments, when executioners began weaving their broken bodies through the wheel's spokes. Picture a human pretzel, spine twisted into impossible angles, arms and legs threaded between wooden slats, and you're basically there. Then came the display phase. The wheel, now sporting its human ornament, would be hoisted onto a tall pole and erected in public view. The broken body would hang there for days, sometimes weeks, exposed to weather, scavenging birds, and the horrified stares of passerbys. Some victims survived 3 days. And 1384, during the Black Death, a man named Bonadies endured 4 days and nights on the wheel. The most extreme case on record involves Christman Genipertinga, who allegedly survived 9 days of this methodical destruction in 1581, kept alive with water so his suffering could continue. The wheel was reserved for serious crimes, those acts that medieval society deemed most threatening to the social order. But what made this particularly insidious was how legal systems embraced it. Courts would sometimes show mercy by ordering the executioner to deliver a coup de grace, a killing blow to the chest or neck after the limbs were broken. Without this mercy, victims could linger for days. The breaking wheel remained legal and actively used across Europe well into the 19th century. Bavaria didn't abolish it until 1813, with the very last documented execution by breaking wheel taking place in Prussia in 1841. For centuries, European justice systems considered this level of public brutality necessary. Level 7. Nyos Lake Disaster. At 9:30 in the evening on August 21st, 1986, a rumbling sound echoed across the tranquil crater lake in northwestern Cameroon. That sound would mark the beginning of one of history's most disturbing natural disasters, the Lake Nyos disaster. The lake, sitting in a volcanic crater just 400 years old, had been acting as a pressure cooker for decades. Deep beneath its surface, carbon dioxide seeped continuously from magma chambers 50 miles below, dissolving into the cold bottom waters and building pressure. Over time, more than 5 gallons of CO2 became dissolved in every gallon of water at the lake's bottom, creating what scientists would later describe as a time bomb. The lake was literally holding its breath, saturated beyond its breaking point. Then, something triggered the explosion. Maybe it was a landslide, cold rainwater hitting the surface, or simple oversaturation. But whatever the cause, approximately 100,000 to 300,000 tons of carbon dioxide burst from the depths. Some estimates put the release as high as 1.6 million tons. The eruption created a 330-foot water fountain and spawned a 25-meter tsunami that scoured the shore. But the water wasn't the real killer. That honor belongs to the invisible cloud that followed. The gas cloud rose initially at nearly 100 kilometers per hour before gravity took hold. Being 1.5 times heavier than air, carbon dioxide descended like a silent flood of death, pouring down valleys and hugging the ground. It swept through villages up to 25 kilometers away, displacing all oxygen in its path. The cloud was 160 feet thick in places, turning the landscape into an oxygen-starved death zone. Ephraim Che, a farmer living on high ground, heard the rumbling that night but thought nothing of it. When he woke up the next morning and walked down toward the lake, the silence was overwhelming. There were no birds, no insects, not even flies buzzing. What he found was shocking. The dead bodies of 31 family members and 400 cattle. The flies weren't bothering the corpses because the flies were dead too. The disaster claimed 1,746 people and 3,500 livestock. Though exact numbers remain estimates, and survivors began burying bodies in mass graves before authorities could conduct proper counts. Joseph Nquain described waking up unable to speak or breathe properly, finding his daughter already dead beside him. Monica Lamnong lost 53 of her 56 family members, waking up alone among the bodies with strange burns on her arm. Many victims were found exactly where they would have been at 9:30 p.m., by cooking fires, in doorways, lying in their beds. Rescue teams didn't arrive for 36 hours, and when they did, they needed oxygen tanks and protective gear. The normally brilliant blue lake had turned reddish-brown as iron-rich bottom water oxidized in the air, and the water level had dropped by 1 meter. With trees around the shoreline flattened, some survivors who found themselves surrounded by corpses took their own lives rather than face the horror. The disaster left approximately 12,000 survivors displaced into resettlement camps scattered across the region. These camps, initially meant as temporary shelter, became permanent homes for many. Scientists installed degassing pipes in 2001 to prevent future disasters, with additional pipes added in 2011. These systems pump CO2-saturated water from the lake bottom to the surface, where the gas can escape safely. However, the degassing process will take decades to complete, and dangerous levels of gas remain. The natural dam containing the lake is also weakening, posing additional threats to downstream communities. It's only a matter of time before it happens again. If you're still in the mood for more disturbing icebergs, why not check out this video on the most disturbing things on the internet?